Hi, everyone. Welcome to Tech Tip Talk, and I am Sarah Walworth.
I'm Christina McGrath, and we're Knitting Tech Editors.
So this month, we are doing a new format. For the last year and a half, we've been giving some presentations on information and about tech editing, and we have been answering your questions, a lot of questions, and we decided to try something new this month, and we're really excited about it. We are going to be interviewing for at least through the end of the year some of our tech editing colleagues whom we want to get to know better, and we feel like you guys would too. So
today, our first guest will be Jessica Schwab, who is not only a tech editor, but also administers testnets, creates charts and layouts, and most recently completed the masterclass in grading so she can be a better resource for size-inclusive design. Jessica's enthusiasm for her work and the projects she works on is infectious, and I love it. She's a wonderful support to many designers, and we're really excited to have her with us today.
All right, so should we let her in?
Let her in.
There we go. Let's see, I'm going to do it this way first. And there she is.
Hi, Jess. Thanks for joining us today.
Thank you both for having me. This is delightful.
We're really excited that you could be here with us.
Yeah, I love what you guys are doing with this channel. It's wonderful.
Oh, thanks.
So to our audience, those of you who are here, feel free to throw any comments or questions that you have for any of us or for Jessica specifically into the chat. We'd love to hear what you have to say. So should we start? We have prepared some questions for you. So let's see here. Let's start with this one. How did you begin tech editing, Jess?
I took a class in 2018 at Knit City in Vancouver with Kate Atherley. Oh. And if you ever have a chance to take a class of hers or get any of her books, I highly recommend. She's a great resource for beginning editors as well as beginning designers. And at the end of the class, she waved a magic wand and said, "Congratulations, you're all tech editors."
No way.
Which is, you know, it's a little cheeky, but the point being, there's no official, there's no certificate that says you are now a tech editor. You can do a lot of courses online, which most people do, but it's kind of in the work. It's very much on the job training, I would say. So once I took the class, it gave me the confidence to know that this was something I had been thinking about doing. It was a good fit for my love for details and spreadsheets and analysis and problem solving, and coupled with I've been knitting for over 20 years, and I'd knit just about everything at that point. So it was a good marriage for me. So the class helped with that, and it just gave me the tools I needed to know, okay, what next? And just started reaching out to some designer friends and said, hey, if you've got a pattern, would you mind letting me have the first crack at it so I can get some practice? And then it just kind of took off from there.
I love that, because it seems like that's the way that a lot of us have come into this skill set is we just have to practice. There's no you don't have to go get a badge or
right.
Necessarily.
There's not the barrier. There's no barrier to entry other than your own yourself, really. Right. I would say that's my kitty Lola there. I would say that having a class is definitely a good idea, but I also know people that have just jumped into it by working on other patterns of their friends and just kind of getting a feel for it. So.
Right. Okay. Kitty name. What's the kitty's name?
Kitty's name is Lola. She's a calico, so she's very vocal, and of course she likes to jump on right now.
Well, of course, Christina's looking to her left because she usually has one that walks.
They're scratching outside the door, I have the door shut because people, yep. And so the cats, they want to get in.
As soon as there's a shut door, now it's the most interesting room in the house.
Of course, exactly. Or you're on the phone or on a video chat. They want to be in it.
Yeah, exactly.
Yep. Do you edit knit or crochet or both, Jess?
Primarily knit. I do a very minimal amount of crochet, and if there's crochet in a pattern as part of a knitwear pattern where it's an element of it, I feel okay with that because but my crochet skills are pretty limited. So it's almost entirely knit.
All right, so now the one I love to ask. What do you love to edit and why?
I started out primarily editing accessories because that's where I felt most comfortable with. So lots of shawls, lots of hats. But lately I took a look at my Ravelry. I have a Ravelry bundle that kind of shows some of the patterns that I've edited that I've been able to add there.
Oh, excuse me. I saw that. I thought that was a genius idea. I thought that was so great. I saw those that was such a
Okay, wait. So tell us how you what does that mean? You made a Ravelry.
So when you go onto Ravelry, you can favorite a pattern and then you can add it to a bundle. So I will go through a pattern that I've edited for somebody and then add it to a bundle. So shawls, sweaters, other accessories, that kind of thing. And I think there's a link to it if you go to my Instagram profile. I have a link tree and there should be a link to that if anyone wants to see that. It's kind of nice for me also to go back and look at it because I didn't realize, I think I've edited over 40 or 50 sweaters now.
Wow.
which is insane. And that's just in the last, I've really only been doing this a lot for 2 years. So sweaters have been kind of the thing, and I've gotten much more comfortable doing garments, and then as well as socks. Once I became a sock knitter, I felt much more comfortable editing socks. Before, it was a challenge because I didn't even have all the terminology down. But now that I have jumped onto the sock bandwagon, I find it much easier and much more rewarding to edit those. But garments are kind of my bread and butter. And then having taken the masterclass in grading that Sarah's a part of, that was really helpful for me for grading, doing more grading and working with garments as well, and then doing more size inclusive grading as well.
Do you like grading? Do you like doing the grading?
I do. I do and I don't. I like the actual process of it, but when it comes down to some of the design decisions, that's where I get stuck. And so I like the grading process for the designer and me to be very collaborative. So I'll help with the math and getting the table set up. And I feel very good about that part. Like, that part is enjoyable to me and I feel pretty good about it. But where I get stuck, and I think maybe you guys can speak to this as well, is when it comes down to we've got a situation where we need the math to do this, but the design is dictating this. And then how to fix those issues. And that's where I feel less confident because I don't have a background in design, and I don't make design decisions. So I really rely on the designer to help with that portion and say, here's what our goals are, but how are we going to achieve them now?
Well, and since it's their design, like, it's not really our decision.
Mm-hmm.
Like, you probably, you shouldn't be the one deciding, really. I mean, sometimes designers will ask, for help with that. That's one thing, but you're totally right to do it that way. That makes perfect sense.
Yeah. It's one thing that I think sometimes people think they just turn the pattern over to you, and I go into my little cave, and then magic happens. And it just comes out the other end a perfect pattern. And of course, that's not even remotely. There is a cave involved, but there's no magic.
There's a heck of a lot of spreadsheet work.
And a lot of back and forth.
Yeah. Yes, exactly. I think it's the back and forth that I appreciate the most of. And I sometimes I worry I'm getting like a little bit extra for the designer of like, but how about here? And how about here? And they're just like, I don't know. I don't care. Just make it work. But that's like you said, Christina, that's what they're good at. I'm better at maybe the mathy bits, but they're better at how is this going to look? How does this match what your intent was?
Right. And it's their intent. So
yeah,
it's got to be what they want.
Yeah, exactly.
What are the errors you come across the most in your work, Jess?
One that comes up over and over again is repeat versus work.
Oh.
I have an article on that.
Yeah. So if you say something like repeat the above rows X more times, or work the above rows X more times, work the above rows X times total, repeat the above rows X times total. All of those can mean a slightly different thing, and it can get confusing for the knitter to know what you meant. And even designers fall into this trap of I can tell by the math. If I go back and say, actually, you worked this decrease this many times, that means it's this many more times, because you had one you did already. So that's one that I think throws knitters off, it throws designers off, it throws everyone off. It's one of those things where it's a personal preference. Some people like work versus repeat. I personally like work something X total times. I think that's very clear. But I see that getting make in terms of mistakes or errors, not accounting for how to word that properly.
Yeah, I think it gets used like interchangeably, you know.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And then not staying consistent throughout the pattern with it too.
All right, so see this comment. Tressa says, you just ran that pattern, you just edited for me.
It's really not that uncommon. Like, I want to say it comes up in like many of the patterns I work on. Mm-hmm. And sometimes I'll just change something and say, hey, this is the clearer way to do this. But if a person's preference is, but that's not clear to them, that it's hard to like force it that way. But it's just, as long as it's correct, and if your test knitters are fine with it and they understand it, great, not a problem.
And I think that happens a lot. Where do you find that you have to educate sometimes? Like, okay, this is what this actually is conveying, the information. I find, like, if a designer says repeat rows 3 through 4, or repeat row 3 every 4th row, they don't. There's a lot of misunderstanding about what that every 4th row is. Is it 1, 2, 3? Okay, on the 4th. Or is it
work 4
and then do 1? Is it on the 1st row? In other words, there can be, sometimes I find I have to communicate a lot with clients on what this could mean to them when they read it, and maybe what could be confused. Do you find that you have to do education?
Yeah, I do. And sometimes it helps just because it's very clear to them. And because I've done so much test knitting too, I think that also helps me read a pattern for, even if I know exactly what they mean, I can sometimes find the areas where this is what's going to be a challenge. And so getting them to think, like you said, kind of educating people about this might be the way you've always seen it done. Right. But that doesn't mean that that's how everyone is going to read this or interpret this. So another error, but also kind of an educational thing I've had to do, is making sure that your chart reflects the right side of the work that you're seeing. So like in a mosaic chart, just because you're knitting every round on the right, if it's worked flat and you've got mosaic and it's kind of a typical garter mosaic, you're knitting every round. So on the right side, you've got a row of knits and you've got a row of purls. You didn't work a purl to make that ridge, but your chart needs to show it as a purl, because if you were to look at that chart, that's how that work would look.
Right.
And that's that educational process where I know designers are looking at me going, but that's not what I did. I didn't purl. Why should there be a purl symbol on my chart?
Yeah.
It doesn't have to. You're saying then that we're not asking you to do a purl stitch. We're just showing you that it's going to look like a purl stitch. And that sometimes kind of, there's some discrepancy there, which I think people have, again, a preference of, but that's not how I work. That's not how it looks to me.
Right. And I think that this is something that we run into a lot with questions about charts, is but can't I make the symbols in the way that I am actually working them on the needles? And we're like, yeah, you could, but then you got to explain that this is not how this is different from how all the other charts are depicted, because that right side of the work is the beauty of showing what the right side of the work looks like to you in a visual way is the beauty of using charts. So.
Exactly. And if you're a written person, you like following the written instructions, it's no issue at all. But for somebody that, like, I'm a chart person. I love looking at the charts and following along with them. Yeah, it's just like I'm a visual person, so the more cues you can give me as the knitter to what this is supposed to look like, the more I'm likely to succeed. And so, like you said, Sarah, as long as you can make that chart symbol whatever you want, especially if you have to create a new stitch, right? You're going to have to define that. But as long as you very clearly define it and say somewhere in a note that that this is what this is depicting and this is why, then, that's much better.
So, oops, hold on. I just clicked on the wrong thing. Okay, next question. What advice, Jess, would you give to a designer just starting out?
Ooh, I would say if you're just writing your first pattern, this is a rude term, but we call it a puke draft when you're just doing, like, creative writing. Get your puke draft down, which is just you put your notes down as you're making your sample. Do it while you're making your sample. Do it while you're making your sample. Do not rely on your magnificent mind to remember all of the things you did while you were making it. You're sure you'll remember. You'll get to a point where you will not remember, and you'll be back there counting stitches somewhere going, how many did I decrease? How quickly did I decrease?
Or have to reknit the sample.
Or have to reknit the sample. So, and be really mindful about your yarn usage too, because I think a lot of designers just wind that yarn up, cast on, and get going. Make really, really impeccable notes about your yarn usage, because you're going to need that later. And if it includes your swatch. So tips for new designers: make lots of notes, but make them while you're making your very first sample. If you're intending to make another one, that's totally fine. And then the other thing I would say is, once you're sitting down to, like, once you've got your first rough draft done of all of your notes, when you're starting to put actual numbers to it, if it's in terms of grading or whatever, start at the end and work backwards. So if you've designed a top-down sock and you need to end at a certain number of stitches for the toe, and you have some markers along the way of what you need to, some goals you need to hit along the way, start at the end and work your way backwards, because you'll set yourself up for more success if you get to where you need to go. Whereas when you're starting from the beginning, this probably doesn't make a lot of sense, but if you're starting from the beginning, you can kind of design yourself into a corner of, uh-oh, I've gotten to here and I can't do this now.
Right.
Like, you need to know where you're going before you can figure out how you're going to get there.
Exactly. I would say, I tell people this for sweaters. If it's a top down raglan, know what your chest stitches or your hem stitches need to be ahead of time, so that you can make some good decisions design wise and math wise that get you to that point. Because a lot of designers are very intuitive knitters, and they just do the thing, right? They don't necessarily, they just kind of make it work while they're on the needles. That's fine. Lots of people do that. But now when you're talking about turning that design into the pattern, the winging it doesn't work anymore. Your knitter needs to know precisely how you did what you did.
Yes, 100%. And we got some great comments here. Sarah says, I have pen and notebook for all my project bags.
Exactly. And if you don't have room for that, there's lots of, I'm a notepad person too. Like I love little tiny like field notes and things like that, and mechanical pencils. That's my jam. But you also, most of us have our phones with us. Jot your notes down in your phone, and then save it into a document or something. And it doesn't have to be as descriptive as possible, because also you think you'll know what your shorthand means.
You won't remember.
You won't remember. And so Catherine says, favorite saying I heard, your brain is for being creative, not for holding information. And that's what phones are for. That's what notebooks are for.
Definitely. Yeah. And then it frees up designing is such a dual purpose practice. It's very creative. It's also very like analytical and brain thinking oriented. And so if you're somebody that can balance those two things really well, fantastic. But most people lean a little one way or the other. And so knowing that about yourself as a designer, if you're one of those intuitive designers that doesn't necessarily take fantastic notes or isn't really comfortable with sort of the guts of the pattern, know that about yourself going into it. And then I guess another tip I would have kind of related to that is like, know why you're doing this.
Yes.
Ask yourself why you're doing this. There's a lot of emotional labor that goes into designing. It's like any creative work. It's not just about the finished object. It's about putting yourself out there. It's about marketing yourself or opening yourself up to both praise as well as criticism. If you get something wrong in your test knit group, are you going to be able to handle your test knitters getting frustrated when they reach a problem? Hopefully you've had the pattern edited and it doesn't get to that point. Maybe you put it up on Ravelry and it doesn't do as well as you were hoping. Knowing what your goals are for putting the pattern out in the world because you had one friend that said, oh my gosh, this is a great design, you should put it out there. Ask yourself what's going to make you feel successful. And if it's just publishing the pattern, great, do it, go for it. I am 100% behind you. But if your goal is, I'm going to make this my full-time job and I'm going to be the next great big designer, know that what you're putting into it and what your emotional needs are going into it too.
Right.
Such great advice.
Good advice.
I love it. Thank you for that.
Sure.
What are you most excited about right now that in knitting or that you're working on?
Oh, like project wise?
Whatever.
I'm almost done with my I am making a day tripper cardigan by Mary Jane Mucklestone. We had a little knit along. We called it the Quickie Cardi knit along. And of course, I didn't finish my own knit along because
it happens.
It happens. Work-related knitting sometimes 100% takes precedent. And so, but I've got the yoke done, and it's knit in lettlopi, which is one of my favorite yarns because it's just so lofty and
I want to grab it.
It's real. It's so light. Like the whole project is going to barely weigh anything.
Right.
So it's actually light lopi.
Yes.
Light lopi.
Lettlopi. Yeah.
I know,
So,
but I'm thinking light.
Oh, yes. Correct. Absolutely. Yeah. And it's knit at such a nice open gauge, which I think a lot of people don't necessarily associate with a sweater. You want kind of a denser gauge because you want some structure, or you don't want pilling or whatever, but this is knit at such a open gauge and the yarn can handle that. So it goes super fast and it creates a lovely fabric.
Well, lettlopi has those other fibers sort of sit on top that kind of fill all that.
Yeah. Once they meet their neighbors,
great. A great yarn for protection in the weather.
Absolutely. Yeah.
That's what my son's sweaters and mittens are.
As we head into a colder season, I'm sure that's one you're going to want to get off the needles soon.
Absolutely. Yeah. I just dug some some of my warmer sweaters out for the season. It's always so nice to dig them. I keep some around year round because honestly, I live in the Pacific Northwest. It's always chilly here at some point during the year. So I have my wool out most of the year, but there are some that are just for cold weather only, and I just pulled them out, and it's so nice to revisit them.
So yeah, we're excited too. Christina's wearing a sweater for the first time. So
nice.
So a tricky question maybe. What would you like to see change in our industry? This is an important question for us because part of what is important for Christina and I is to be disruptors. We want to see changes happen in our industry, and we'd love to hear what you have to say about this.
I love that because I think this industry can get the textile industry or the handmaking industry, so to speak, which was, people consider this a hobby, right? So, and it's women's work, right? And traditionally, and there's a lot of history and a tradition that goes with that. And so there's a lot of baggage that can come with that too, which is we all love that connection. Most of us love that connection to the tradition and the history and being able to look back, but being able to bring the industry forward is really important. 30 years ago, a knitting pattern had so little guidance that you were lucky if what you made looked anything like what was in the pattern. We've now all come to realize a knitting pattern can be much more and be very educational and very helpful. And so knitting patterns themselves have adapted a lot. And to that end, there's a lot more work that goes into them. There's editing, there's test knitting, there's sample knitting, there's the marketing. There's so many little pieces that go into, if you're an independent designer, especially. So to that end, I would love to see a slightly better wage for designers and for people working in the industry. I'm reluctant to say, I'm reluctant to jump on the pay people what they're worth, because absolutely, especially because there are quite a few women working in this industry, and that's a thing that's important to me. But I also know that this isn't just about earning money. Right. We have our bills to pay, but this is also about creating an environment where people feel really excited to be part of it and feel included and welcomed. And sometimes that means saying, the only way I'm going to be able to do this work is if I can pay my bills. Right. And yes. So getting knitting patterns up to a higher standard, but while the prices have gone down on them, when I look at what sewing patterns get and yes. what you get when you buy a sewing pattern compared to what you get when you get a knitting pattern, I'd really like to see that gap shift. And I think everything is moving in the right direction in terms of size inclusivity. And I would hope that things start moving into a more gender inclusivity as well, that things are not, we don't consider this to be, women's sweaters. They're right. just sweaters. Right. Mm-hmm.
Exactly.
And there are some designers to that end that are doing a fantastic job. And those are the things I'm excited to see happening, but that I'm hopeful will continue to happen, and the more we have people kind of opening those doors and saying, hey, here, let's push this a little further, more people feel excited to jump in and say, oh, okay, yeah, let's do this now.
That's excellent. Totally on board with that.
Yeah, like just because something is the way it's always been done doesn't make it the best way to do something.
No, not
or
at
the
all.
way it needs to remain.
Right.
Right, exactly. And there's a way to, I was just watching a cooking show last night about, people learning the traditional way to cook a dish. But then there's the reluctance to, but we've always done it this way. This is the only way to do this. And then having a younger generation come along and say, I can hold all of those things while keeping it new and adding new things to it. I can have it relate to the tradition that you're holding very near and dear, but have it be something new. You can do both. We're clever people. This is how we get by in the world, is we expand upon what's already been there, and we do it in a way that's empowering to people as opposed to shutting people out.
It's innovation at its best.
Exactly.
Okay, some maybe quick questions. What tools do you use to tech edit? We get asked about this a lot.
Like every episode.
Interesting. So, I mean, other than like the obvious, which would be, you know, a spreadsheet, a spreadsheet. I actually I'm a pen and paper person, pencil and paper person. I use graph paper a lot because sometimes you just gotta chart out that short row because.
Oh my God, we're like always charting short rows too.
Okay.
Way.
I am so glad to know it's not just me.
Oh
it's
no.
the only way with those things sometimes.
Sometimes you just have to, there's only so much knitting in your mind you can do. You know, you have to kind of get it down on paper and look at it and go, and I'll literally draw, this is the direction of the knitting. I stopped here, I turned, I went here. I do that for like a heel turn, or if there's some very interesting shaping going on in the shoulders of something. So my I have graph paper books everywhere and very sharp pencils everywhere, because that's one of my easiest, quickest ways to figure something out, is by kind of noodling through it, you know.
I guess there.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think people. I'm so glad to hear it, because I think a lot of people think sometimes it's just all math, and yes, it is. But sometimes it's like some it's problem solving too that isn't necessarily math related.
Right.
And I also keep around what I consider a tool, or a spare skein of 2 colors of yarn and knitting needles, and they sit at my desk so that I can go, if there's a stitch I'm unfamiliar with, or if they like a bind off or something that I've just never seen before, or they're describing it a different way, I pull those out and I do it, and I look at it and go, oh, I'll be darned, yeah, that does work.
Right.
So I consider that to be a really useful tool too. Don't be afraid to like sometimes just jump in and try it and see if it works. And then I guess in terms of like actual software, I use, you know, Google Docs, and that's my preferred method for editing people, because I can have an ongoing conversation with the designer. It tracks everything that we've done and we chatted about, and the Google Sheets. And then I really make my spreadsheet work for me. Like, it's the boss for me. I use color coding so that I can quickly see when an issue has popped up. And I think that's something that some designers more like, I don't feel like every designer has to know spreadsheets in and out, but you really, really ought to spend like an hour plunking around in either Excel or Google Sheets or something, and making sure you understand how to write your formulas. Your formulas can help you so much. I think in your class, Sarah, you talked about making something say true or false. Yes. Those truths jump out at you if you've done something right or wrong. Man, that's just like a visual cue, right?
As long as you pull the correct cell from above, which,
yes.
Yeah, I pulled the wrong one before, and then
otherwise,
it was false.
Put yourself in a panic. False, 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 false. Oh God, what did I do? So make your spreadsheet your design partner. You know, make it part of your toolkit and understand it. And if you don't, chances are, if you're working with an editor and you say, you know what, I need to get a little bit better at this part, they'll help you out with that. Like, they might help you work on let's get a basic spreadsheet set up for you so that it plunks in your gauge, so that if you needed to change your gauge, you didn't need to change it literally everywhere throughout your spreadsheet, because you think you'll remember where you put the gauge in and what it referred to in every formula, no, you will not. You will not remember. I'm so sorry.
Exactly. So we have a question from our audience. Sarah asks, do you ever find yourself wanting to make a design right away while you're editing it?
Listen, I have such a problem with that. And sometimes I'm pretty good about it, and sometimes it just doesn't. I can't hold out, especially if it's like socks. I'm like, I could just
Hang it out.
just throw those on. I really should try to make sure that this works out well. Because you see things when you see something inside and out from the very beginning, it creates a, I don't know, a little bit a sense of ownership over it, and you just get really excited for it. So absolutely, I absolutely have a list of designs that I have edited that I would really love to make immediately.
Especially because they're edited. You know it's right. You can trust the pattern.
With that pattern, you're
Or
all
you
set.
hope. You hope anyway.
You hope you don't find a mistake as you're knitting.
Right? It's a little bit like going back and like if you're an actress watching the movie you were in and you're like, I can't watch it. I don't want to know.
Yep. Yep. All right, real quick question. What's your favorite knitting and crochet notion?
It's actually a tiny crochet hook. One of those little short ones that comes, it's usually like in a 3mm, 4mm size, and it's about this big and it fits everywhere. It's great for weaving in ends really quickly. It's great for, I dropped a stitch. Grab that. So I have many of those in my my project bags, and pen and paper too. I'm a pen and paper person, so I always have those. Those are my preferred tools, and those fantastic little bell stitch markers, which I have sitting literally everywhere around my house. I put them in a little jars everywhere, because the removable stitch marker that can be used to mark your decreases or your increases as you're working. It can catch that dropped stitch. They can do lots of fantastic things. So those are my favorites.
Awesome. What is your favorite yarn to work with? You kind of said that that you liked Lopi. Is that your favorite?
No, I don't have like a single favorite. I will say I have a favorite type of yarn, which is I really love woolen-spun yarns, which Lopi is a woolen-spun yarn. There are, if you've knit with something from Harrisville or Brooklyn Tweed, Shelter is a well-known woolen-spun, and the fabric it creates for garments is so light. You don't feel like you're wearing a very heavy, you could, if I were to make something that had heavy cables and baubles and things like that, I want woolen-spun, because if it's worsted spun, it's so dense and it weighs a ton, and it's very, to me, it doesn't necessarily feel as good on me. I love the fabric that a woolen-spun works up. So I've been spinning more lately, and I've been spinning a lot more woolen-spun too.
Nice.
That's so great. Oh, spinning. It's tough. I don't have the touch in some way. I don't know.
Well, you're wise to not start, because it's one of those things. It's like once you start, it's quite addictive, because it's just like, now I have like a little tiny wheel sitting in my office. So it's a great way for me to unwind and problem solve while I'm spinning. Your brain can just kind of go with the flow, and all of a sudden you'll have solved the issue you're working on.
It's like very peaceful.
Mm-hmm.
Meditative.
Yep, absolutely.
So we've only got less than 20 minutes left. Do you guys mind if we jump ahead to some of the questions that we got in our messages? And Christina, is that okay?
Yeah, let's do it.
All right. So the first question that we got is, how do you pass on a pattern you don't feel comfortable editing, even from a regular client, if you don't feel confident for it. And just as I just don't feel like you have to answer this, we want to jump in and put in our 2 cents too. Who wants to start?
Christina, you go first.
I think you have to, I always like to think about that me working on a pattern is the designer's time and money, right, for me to do this. And if I really think that I'm not capable, sometimes if I really think I'm not the person for the job and I'm not the one to do it, I'm going to be honest about that, right? So I might say I'll write an email and say, I mean, and if it's someone you work with all the time, that's totally fine. You can say, I love working on your patterns and love working with you. This particular type of construction or this particular item is not my strong suit, and I don't want to waste your time or mine, trying to figure it out. Maybe I can learn more about it, and in the future I could do it. But in the meantime, I can, get together a list of editors who'd be happy to help you with this project who have availability right now. There's lots of ways you can do that. You can, post in the Tech Editor Hub on Facebook. You can ask other tech editors that you know. And the designer might not want you to do that. They might have their own ways to find another tech editor if you're not available. But just be honest. If you don't feel confident doing something, you don't want to cause more issues,
Right.
I'd just be honest and say, but offer to help, them find a solution to get that pattern worked,
Yeah, I agree. I think there's no shame in being very honest with the people that you work with. Just because you're the editor doesn't mean you're the be all end all, last voice and last word on the subject. Everyone has their strengths and weaknesses. I have another fellow editor that will not edit brioche because it's not something they've done a lot of. And so if there's a lot of, especially if it's like a heavily patterned and charted and decreased, and I'll be honest, I've done some basic brioche, but if somebody sent me an all over, I have never seen these types of decreases before, I will be very, very honest. And it's okay to be honest. That doesn't make you a bad editor. You're not going to scare, hopefully if you scared your designer off, then maybe that wasn't the best fit for you both anyway. If that's the primary type of design they do and you want to keep working with them as an editor, then it's upon you to start doing some research and maybe improving your skill set and maybe knitting some of those patterns so you get comfortable with them. But like Christina said, that honesty, it's a collaborative process. If you don't have a really good, open, honest relationship with the people you're working with, that sets up for a lot of challenges.
So that segues well into our next question. How do you deal with people you don't want to work with, as they are difficult for you to work with?
It will happen. It will definitely happen.
Yes.
You will find people that they can be fantastic designers and they can be fantastic people, but your work styles don't mesh, or your set of skills don't match what they need.
Or for some reason you're just not communicating well,
Yep. In that case, being honest to a point. I wouldn't you don't need to burn any bridges, because it might be that they're just not the right fit for you right now, and vice versa. So if it's somebody that's a little bit newer and you're being challenged by their lack of experience, and you're thinking, I can't quite take this on right now. I think having a resource like the Tech Editor Hub is great to be able to say, my schedule is such that it doesn't fit right now, but definitely get in touch with another editor but keep in touch. If you want to keep that line of communication open, be in touch. You can always kind of buy yourself some grace period and some general goodwill by leaving that door open. But I've also had situations where things just fell apart, and it's very much okay to say this isn't working.
Right.
you need a different style of editor, or
Yes.
and that's okay too. It's hard. It's not, it feels like a breakup, you know, it feels like very like, ooh.
I think
But
it's important to remember that it's not about, you know, anybody being a bad person or anybody doing anything wrong.
right.
That's not what it's about. So it is a hard email to write, but it doesn't have to feel like it's not about that. Like you said, you're not burning bridges, you're not knocking anybody down. It's just for whatever reason you're just not the right fit for what they need, and maybe, you know, and that's okay.
Yeah.
And I would say, if you're just starting out as a tech editor, sometimes we are so excited to have new clients. And then we find out as we work with them, you know, our time zones don't match. Their process doesn't work for me. They want to do, you know, to edit just a part of the pattern and send it to me, and lots of back and forth, but I only want to do this once. Or something about your personalities don't mesh. So when you're first starting out, you might feel like, oh, I have to keep this client, but it just stresses me out when I see their email in my inbox. Well, you have to really go to your place, wherever it is, journaling, or talk to a good close friend or a loved one or a partner, and decide, okay, what part of this, why is this bothering me? Do I need to have different boundaries in my business? Do I need to streamline my process? Do I need to deal with some personal issues in order to be with it, you know, to have this client? And I'm speaking from experience here. Sometimes it's okay just to say, this isn't working out. Like Jess said, this just isn't going to work out for us. Let me help you find someone else. And maybe that will open the door for something different. But I would say before, don't ever burn a bridge, but always keep things open, and always deal with, okay, why am I running into this issue? What is the source of this? Is it something that I need to deal with personally, or I need to deal with in the way my business is framed, or what I'm experiencing, or how I want to do my editing process? In other words, use it as a learning opportunity to grow as an editor, to not just to, oh, I don't want to work with this person anymore.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree with that. And then, like you said, you know, keeping that open, because you never know, and knowing that you're giving them something, it doesn't feel like a no if you're leading them in another direction.
Yeah.
Like, I can't work with you on this right now for whatever reason you decide to give them. You're booked, you're busy, you've decided to stop editing that particular type of pattern, whatever it is. But here are some other people to get in touch with and create. And if you have a little network outside of the Tech Editor Hub, which can get sometimes it's hard to know where for a designer to start, but at least you've given them some other options, and you don't feel like you've given them a no. You feel like you've given them a, well, not right now, but this instead.
Exactly.
Yeah.
We got one more question. Can I still become a tech editor if my math is a little sketchy?
I suppose it depends on what you mean by your math is sketchy. Like, do you mean that you can't do calculus? That's okay. I haven't done calculus since college either. I 100% look up how to take the area of a triangle every time I have to do it. I finally remembered. Your spreadsheet that you set up is your best friend. And so as long as you feel comfortable getting your spreadsheet set up to do the math for you, you're not going to sit down and do all of these calculations out by hand. At least I hope you're not, because wow, that would be painful.
Time consuming.
Yeah.
Well,
and
it's
also,
not necessary. Like,
yes,
spreadsheet can do the work for you.
yes, exactly. It's you're bound to introduce some errors if you're doing things 100% by hand. So getting that spreadsheet to and carrying those formulas across and having it do the work for you means that you didn't have to just sit down and take the square root of whatever. It did it for you. So if you understand, I think a tech editor needs to feel comfortable with the basics and understand, like, if you can sit down and look at a shaping formula and it makes sense to you, your math is fine. You've got it. It's really not, luckily it's not rocket science. A lot of times it's very intuitive. So as long as if you can follow a knitting pattern, guess what? Your math is probably fine because you've done that, right? So yeah, you can still be an editor, and there's other strengths you can too. Maybe you're not going to be a grader. Maybe you're not going to jump into grading, and maybe you're going to do things that are less. Maybe you're just going to decide to focus on things that don't have a lot of shaping, like shawls or things like that. And if you're a really good copy editor. That was adorable.
Photo bomb.
Husband, cat, whatever.
That was adorable.
Teenagers.
Sorry to interrupt you.
No worries.
I love it.
But yeah, I think there are other parts of editing that are not just math related. There's reading for clarity. There's reading for making sure grammar, things like that. And you can be fantastic at those things. And then again, you can also be honest with your clients and say, well, if you are looking for someone that's really, really good at these things, that's what I'm really good at. But if you need something like this, I don't have as much experience in that. And being honest is really important.
I would say,
oh, sorry, Sarah, go ahead.
I was going to say, related to math, is that a lot of this also has to do with practice. So I would say if, for instance, you want to be better at you feel like your math is sketchy, but you're ready to jump in and really learn the math behind knitting. Practice all those shaping formulas over and over again. In other words, it gets easier the more that you do it too. So don't feel like you have to stay where you're at. Oh, this is it, and I can't do any better than this. This can also be a learning opportunity to grow and to get better at the knitting math itself. Christina?
Well, I think what you guys were saying is right. If you're familiar working with knitting patterns, if you're used to reading them and working them, then and maybe you don't need to tech edit things you haven't knit. You can, start out tech editing the things that you knit all the time, things that you're comfortable working with. And the only thing I can think of, because yes, you'll have the spreadsheet to help you out and you can look up, like sometimes trying to figure out how to get a certain measurement, like on a garment, there's certain areas, measurements that need to be taken to make sure they're correct. And you might not know exactly how to get that, like what part of the garment and where are the stitches and rows that correspond to get me that measurement. And you're just going to learn that by, knitting things like that. Looking at, like we all do, like on the graph paper, right? Figuring out where that stuff goes. But it's not everything. Like math is not all of it. But I think being familiar with knitting patterns is most important.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So Jess, we're super excited that you were here with us today.
Yes, thank you so much for being our first guest. This is wonderful.
Oh my goodness.
Such an honor to talk to you both. I really appreciate it. This is a lot, and it's fun to talk to other editors because sometimes what we're doing is very
isolated.
Yeah, it's absolutely.
So how can people find you online? And we'll make sure we put that down in the show notes. And are you taking on new clients?
I'm currently not taking on new clients as of right now. But definitely if you're in search of an editor, do get in touch. My schedule changes very frequently. Projects come and go sometimes with best laid plans with most designers. You never know when something is going to suddenly open up. So online, I'm most active on Instagram, woolgather.knits. And there's a link in my profile where you can go check out some of the patterns that I've edited via Ravelry, like we chatted about, and my email address is in there as well. So that's a good way to get in touch with me. I really, really 100% am getting my website up eventually.
We know how that is.
It's extra work that at one point I thought I was really going to need it to market myself, and then realized word of mouth does a great job of that. So if you're trying to start out, honestly, word of mouth, other designers saying who do you use? What do you do? And so that the website was less important to me. So I spent less time on it.
It's a job.
But do get in touch. I'm going to be very busy the first part of next year working for a publication, but I love working with new designers. I love establishing new collaborations. I don't look at it as a box to check off. I'm not just a thing you need to do to say you did it. I'm there to be a part of your process. And if that's a type of editor you're looking for, definitely get in touch.
Oh, it's amazing. Thank you so much for everything that you shared with us, and all of this time together has been fantastic.
Thank you both. This is an absolute pleasure. Love what you're doing.
Oh, thanks. This is
And
awesome.
we'll see you around. And I guess we're going to do some announcements now, right, Christina?
Yeah.
All right. So we'll see you soon. Take care
Thanks.
of yourself, Jess.
Bye,
Bye-bye.
Jess. Thanks so much.
So this is going to be our new format for the rest of the year. We'd like to announce that our next tech tip Q&A, we are going to be interviewing tech editor Chaitanya Muralidhara. She is an editor that we both work with, and we're really excited to have her on the show. So that'd be November 15th at noon.
Yep.
We'd love to have you here. So make sure that you subscribe here on YouTube and sign up for our newsletter so that we can let you know when we're going on.
And if you have questions for us before the broadcast, you can comment right on the video. In our newsletter, we send the link for the next month's Q&A, and you can go right to that YouTube broadcast before it's even begun and put a comment.
So on our website,
get notified when we go live. It's good.
Exactly. And feel free to go to our website, techtiptalk.com, and download our free pre-edit pattern checklist, right? Am I getting that right? Pre-edit
pattern checklist
that we've made for independent designers to check their own pattern before they send it to an editor to reduce editing time, and even to help you to reduce the amount of errors. We did get a question that Christina.
Oh, we have submitted our book proposal. So now we're fielding questions from publishers. So cross your fingers for us that, cross your fingers. It's exciting to be at the next phase of this.
Yes.
It's really good. I was ready.
Oh yeah, we're ready. And so we've submitted our book proposal to a number of publishers, and we're just waiting to hear back. So we're excited, and we hope to be able to have that book in your hands eventually. Who knows how long this process is going to take? It's not quite as fast as publishing knitting patterns. It gets slower. So, all right. So we'll see you guys.
Thanks for all the support, you guys, really.
Yes, exactly.
Oh, there she is.
The kitty. Thanks for being with us here today, you guys. We love, this is the best part of our month, and we really enjoy chatting with you here. Feel free to send us a question and comment on Instagram. You can DM us, you can email us, or reply to any of our newsletters. And we'd love to answer your questions about tech editing, pattern writing, knitting design. We'll be back next month. What's the date again?
I think it's the 15th.
15th with our next tech editor guest. So we're excited. We'll see you here next month. Take care of yourself.
Bye, everybody.
Bye.